Hello, got a few books here. The Embedding by Ian Watson, a British writer who was an academic until the mid-70s and then went full-time as a writer. This is his first novel. I think his best known. And this is sort of a Babel 17 type science fiction investigation into linguistics concepts. Watson was an acolyte, not sure directly or indirectly, of Noam Chomsky in his linguistics work in the field called generative grammar. My extreme layman's understanding of it is that there's an idea that there's like a fundamental inclination towards language, or like an archetypal structure to human language that's inborn. It's not cultural, it's not learned, that there's something inherent in the way our brains are built that kind of shapes and forms how languages work. I'm sure that's probably only partially accurate, maybe not at all. But this book is an investigation of that, and also a commentary about American foreign policy in Vietnam and Latin America. And it's supposed to be sort of a rough go, a little bit, pretty mixed reviews, but it sounds certainly like an interesting book. It's about a tribe in the Amazon rainforest, and they speak fictional indigenous language, and they are under threat by a damming project that might destroy their home. I could see myself reading it at some point. I think it would be somewhere towards the bottom of the middle of my TBR. A book that will not make it on to my TBR probably ever is Richard Cowper's Clone, also his first novel. Search the word Cowper and see what definition comes up, and then wonder to yourself, what is the nickname of Richard? What's the short form of Richard? It's not his real name. His real name is John Middleton Murray Jr., was John Middleton Murray Jr. He was a British writer who lived in the shadow of John Middleton Murray Sr., more well-known, at least at the time, writer, who I seem to recall greatly disapproved of his son's science fiction dalliances. And this book sounds like absolute dog shit. The writing of female characters is like turn your hair white level awful, apparently. The premise is sort of reminiscent of Beasts by John Crowley. I hate to even really invoke Crowley. Thank God. What haul video would be complete without me having to reposition the camera? It's about some manimals, some uplifted man-human hybrid ape guys trying for political viability or rights or something, and there's like a clone that's looking for other clones. And I didn't peer too far under the hood on this one because it just sounds terrible to me. I guess his other books are more highly regarded than this one, but that one is a pass from old book pilled. Cycle of Fire by Hal Clement. Probably not exactly my bag, but this at least sounds passably interesting. It's about a human expedition to an alien world where they, or is it one guy? Yeah, it's one guy. Nils Kruger was the Earthman, a castaway with a smashed spaceship on the parched surface of the inhospitable planet Abjorman. So this is a forerunner of Enemy Mine by Barry Longyear, which was turned into the Dennis Quaid movie of the 1980s. An important movie for my childhood. The spaghetti strainer coming out of the quicksand, it's one of the scariest things I saw as a kid. This Robinson Crusoe guy has to survive on this planet alongside an alien who knows the exact date, time, and place of his death. Clement is considered one of the great figures in the hard SF tradition. He was a professor or teacher of astrophysics and chemistry, I think it was, and he is recorded as having said that science fiction is a competition or a game between the writer and the science fiction reader. The reader's job is to try to catch out the writer on as many scientific inaccuracies as they can, and the writer's job is to try to head them off at the pass and not commit the errors in the first place. Thanks, Hal. Thank you so much, Hal. Encouraging everybody to be punishing dorks about everything. The cover is good. This is not in the same sequence as Mission of Gravity, which is his most famous book that turned into a book series. Well regarded, it sounds interesting. Clement, despite his sins, I think I would be interested to read. And the books that I don't keep are going to wind up on a Whatnot auction. I sell them live. There's a link below that'll get you $15 in free credit to use with me or with any other Whatnot seller. You still have to pay tax and shipping, but I've been selling a lot of books for between $3 to $6. I've been doing a lot of auctions, so a pretty good chance you'll get some free, scare quotes free or really cheap books. And date and time will also be included in that link. World's Best Science Fiction, 1967. Edited Donald A. Wollheim and Terry Carr, is a cool looking book. It's got these illustrations inside. It includes We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, which is the short story that became Total Recall. Light of Other Days by Bob Shaw, which became Other Days, Other Eyes, his novel. Roger Zelazny, Keys to December. R.A. Lafferty, 900 Grandmothers. Michael Moorcock's Behold the Man, the short story. Avram Davidson, Frederick Pohl, Brian Aldiss, Roger Zelazny again with For a Breath I Tarry, and a handful of others that I know not much about. Crazy good lineup. I will be selling that one. I just have so many anthologies that I feel like I'm not going to get to. Lost World of Time by Lynn Carter. Lynn Carter was the editor at Ballantine, responsible for the Ballantine Adult Fantasy series, and Lynn Carter was a devotee of H.P. Lovecraft, was a scholar of weird fiction, cosmic horror, and fantasy fiction. Put out at least one overview history of fantasy literature that was reviewed by Peter Beagle as being so replete with errors as to be useless, which is kind of a surprise because Carter seemed pretty hardcore in his devotion to fantasy. Published a pretty big volume of original work. Original also in scare quotes, because most of it was pastiche and he was considered a hack. Actually, David Pringle called him a hack. This is one example of that from relatively early in his career. This is pastiche of the Barsoom novels from Edgar Rice Burroughs. Apparently there is a barbarian from the land of Barbaria in this. This is a really obscure one. It's by a writer named Hugh C. Ray, who actually mostly wrote under the pen name Jessica Sterling with an I, writing romance, historical romance books, was really prolific, put out 2 books a year, and published a little bit under his own name as well. This is a science fiction work. Not a ton of info about this book or about him as a writer. He was Scottish, died in 2014, and this is a book without a ton of reviews. The reviews are not glowing. People say it's kind of this grab bag of hackneyed science fiction tropes, but the premise is kind of interesting. It's some American dystopian future where the country is governed by former CEOs. And unfortunately, someone also wrote on this one up here, but that's a great cover. The Invincible by Stanislaw Lem, a book that I have read and reviewed before. This is the one that came out right after Solaris. Was it right before or right after Solaris? One of those. This edition was translated by Wendane Ackerman, who was married to Forrest J. Ackerman, the very famous figure in science fiction fandom, and he was an anthologist and I think also wrote original work. And Wendane Ackerman is the same translator who did the translation for Hard to Be a God in the Daw edition from the 70s. There has since been a direct Polish to English translation, which is probably better. This was translated from Polish to German to English, so she translated it off the German edition. And it's kind of a fun serendipity that I am including both of those back-to-back and back-to-back videos, because those are the 2 translated works that she's best known for. I don't know that she did many more. This is a zany one, 2150 AD by Don and Thea Plym. A god-awful cover. I thought would be another book that would have no Wikipedia, no SFE entry, like 2 reviews on Goodreads. There's like 1,000 reviews of this on Goodreads. This was apparently accurate. This right here, this little splash saying a future bestseller, turned out to be true. This is, at the time, a well-known book from, I think, the late 60s or mid-60s, written by this power couple, 1971, who were promoting what was called the macro philosophy. Yeah, that's right, the macro philosophy. This is a utopian book where this man falls asleep, wakes up in a utopia 150, 200 years in the future where everybody lives on a vegetarian commune. Thea is actually still around putting out work as Thea Alexander. Don't know if one of these is a pen name. Obviously one of these is a pen name. Don't know what her given name is. A lot of those Goodreads reviews are very, very outspokenly positive about how essential and life-changing and genius the book is. So I guess that there are still devotees out there. I don't know. I have not read it. Doesn't seem good. Doesn't seem good. This one does actually seem good, finally. Dogsbody, a juvenile science fiction book by Diana Wynne Jones, who's kind of a cult figure, wrote juvenile fiction mostly, fantasy, a little bit of science fiction. She wrote Howl's Moving Castle, which was the source material for the Miyazaki movie, and she was also a big influence on a lot of fantasy writers, probably most notably on J.K. Rowling, and the popularity of the Harry Potter books led to a lot of her work being republished. The premise is really interesting. It's about a god, this alien intelligence, this godlike being who commands the star Sirius, like is the star or something, is punished by the pantheon of other alien god beings sent to Earth to live in the body of a stray dog in order to retrieve some, important MacGuffin, and the dog is adopted by a young girl, and both of them help each other cope with their families mistreating them. It honestly sounds really good, and it has a great cover. This is a maybe for a keep. Realistically, I don't know when I'm gonna get to this, so I may well sell that one. The Best from Fantastic, edited by Ted White. Ted White was for a time the editor of Fantastic Magazine and Amazing Stories magazine. Amazing Stories was the first dedicated science fiction magazine founded by Hugo Gernsback, one of the most important, events in science fiction history. And there was a companion magazine called Fantastic that I think was consolidated from, I think there were a couple of different magazines that got consolidated into Fantastic. And originally it was meant to be the fantasy companion to Amazing Stories, but there wasn't a strong American market for fantasy writing until after Tolkien, which is an interesting piece of history. Science fiction was far more popular and dominant than fantasy until relatively recently. Fantastic had a pretty troubled, long, difficult history of struggling to stay afloat and never quite attracting that robust a readership, but was also important in launching a lot of careers, especially Zelazny and Le Guin, or at least helping to accelerate their careers. And this came out in 1973 as also a companion book to an anthology that White edited from Amazing Stories. It includes Fritz Leiber, Jerome Bixby, Harlan Ellison, Zelazny, Asimov, Alfred Bester, Paul Anderson, Chad Oliver, Ursula K. Le Guin, and Keith Laumer. A pretty amazing lineup. Man Against Tomorrow by William Nolan. He's the writer who did Logan's Run. I've talked about Nolan in a previous video. He was an anthologist. I didn't know that he also was personal friends with Ray Bradbury and was a Bradbury scholar. And this is notable in that it contains a Bradbury Mars story called Payment in Full that didn't make it into the Martian Chronicles in its original formulation, but did make it into the 2001 Centipede Press edition of Martian Chronicles. It's like the complete edition or something like that. It includes a bunch of these apocryphal Mars stories from Bradbury. And Payment in Full is regarded as being uncharacteristically brutal and hard-edged for Bradbury. It's got a bunch of names, big names in here, and I love how they used to do this when everybody got their own, old-timey ice cream parlor font. Includes Charles Beaumont, who was also a close friend of Nolan's and made it into a bunch of his anthologies. Also includes Special Delivery by Chris Neville, which I also talked about previously. Neville was one of Malzberg's favorites, and I have a couple of his books set aside. This is another William Nolan with a really amazing cover that I cannot find an artist credit for. I looked pretty extensively, can't figure it out. Maybe one of you knows. It's another William Nolan anthology that includes an apocryphal Mars story from Ray Bradbury, this one called The Blue Bottle. It also includes the story One Love Have I by a writer named Robert F. Young that was new to me. I hadn't heard of it, but almost every review of this book talks about how amazing that story is. It's some, tragic romance story a lot of people rave about. They rave about it. Books from 1970, really nice condition on this. Who else is in here? Chad Oliver again, Charles Beaumont again, Robert Bloch, Shackley, Chris Neville again. So he had a Judd Apatow stable of guys. And Walter M. Miller Jr., he's the guy that did Canticle for Leibowitz with The Ties That Bind. Interesting, somewhat obscure book. This one, I yoinked. This was a yoink. I kind of have a bad habit that I'm trying to control for by screening the books harder before I put them up for auction of yoinking books. When I notice something that I didn't notice before looking at it as it is about to auction. So this I'm keeping for myself, and I yoinked it because that's a Wayne Barlow cover. And I won't bore you with my pitch on Wayne Barlow. I've done it dozens of times. He's my favorite artist. And I knew that there was something about that cover that I liked that I couldn't put my finger on. And then I saw his little rune, his little glyph. And I'm actually glad that I pulled this and looked into it, because I just kind of threw it in there blind, because it's an interesting book. Elizabeth A. Lynn is an American science fiction and fantasy writer who mostly writes fiction and is known for being one of the first writers to feature LGBTQ characters. And this book actually is the namesake of a chain of queer bookstores in the New York area. And it sounds like a fascinating book. It's about an artist in his last days, terminally ill, going into space, sacrificing what life he has, foreshortening it in order to see new things and have new experiences to deepen his experience of life and deepen his art. And it's supposed to be a little bit slow, but it sounds really good. It sounds really interesting. So that's the first definite keep. This one I will not be keeping. It's The Tides of Kregen by Alan Burt Akers, which is the pen name, one of the pen names of Kenneth Bulmer, who had a bunch of pen names for which he would create these elaborate like D&D character bios for. So would invent these whole personas to write under, which is kind of an interesting premise, actually. Apparently, he allegedly ghost wrote some of Barry Sadler's books, but this is what he's best known for, at least under this pen name. It was the Dre Prescott series was a long-running Edgar Rice Burroughs pastiche. Boy, there sure seems to be a lot of those that ran for about a decade and a half and was structured in these internal sequences, these cycles. This is book 12 overall in the Dre Prescott series, but it's the first of the Crozier cycle, which is, according to some fans, the best in the series. It apparently has a Michael Whelan cover and illustrations inside, which is sort of neat. Bulmer is also interesting in that he's sort of like Harry Harrison, who is enormously famous in Russia. And I guess Bulmer is huge in Germany, to the point where after a certain point of dwindling sales of the Dre Prescott books domestically, they were published originally in German for the German market, and then I guess maybe translated to English for the English-speaking market. So sort of interesting, not exactly my kind of thing, I don't think, not something I'm going to get to anytime soon at least, so I will sell that. This one I may sell, I may keep. It's called Riding Around in Rigs on the Lake. Just kind of caught my eye. It's the second edition. print on demand, unfortunately. It's got these illustrations of fish, that's a walleye, and obviously it's got the photos of the rigs. There's another rig on the lake, so kind of cool. Stephanie A. Smith's Snow Eyes. She is still alive. She teaches at a college in Florida and has published not a huge volume of work, but work that sounds kind of interesting. She has a blurb here from Le Guin and says that she studied under Le Guin or studied with Le Guin. Le Guin says of this book, the imagined realm of Guillaume is a landscape of a woman's heart, both dark and bright. And readers regard this as kind of a slower paced Le Guin. Some people had some nice things to say about it. I don't really remember what the premise here is. I do remember that she, I think, is best known for a book from 1995 that's like a dystopian book titled Other Nature. This is a 1988 first print. I did see that apparently they race swapped the woman on the front cover to make her white, which also they used to do for Octavia Butler's books. This, I think, is probably my favorite find other than the Barlow. It's The Dream Millennium by James White, not to be confused with Ted White from before. James White is was a Northern Irish writer who wrote hard SF and kind of pulpy adventure science fiction, and was a diehard pacifist who got the nod from Moorcock, was published a lot in Moorcock's New Worlds. And he's someone that I've been curious about for a long time, and I think that this is the one that I'm going to keep and read first. I'm curious about the medical science fiction stuff that he's best known for. The, what's it called? The series that starts with Hospital Station. I don't remember what the name of the whole series is, but he's a big pioneer in that subgenre of science fiction, medical science fiction. This is such an interesting seeming book. It's from later in his career. It's about a space captain on a colony ship escaping a dystopian Earth, having plotted a route that will take him past, and the crew past 11 different potentially habitable planets to colonize. And as they are in cryosleep on this voyage, he and other crew members experience these linearly developing dreams of ancient genetic memory from the whole evolution of life on Earth, from the protoplasmic or like invertebrate stage up through the development into vertebrate life. And there's a sequence told from the POV of a dinosaur, I think, and then through prehistory of humankind up to the modern day. And it's supposed to be an uncharacteristically serious-minded and sort of solemn book from White. And there's a blog that I really have come to like called Science Fiction and Other Suspect Ruminations, I think is the full title, written by an academic writing under the pen name Joachim Boas, that tends to crop up as I research these relatively obscure books, and he's read really prolifically and just has good takes. I think there's only been like a couple of times that I've read something that I didn't exactly agree with, but for the most part, dead on the money, and he says that this is White's best book. So I think I'm going to keep this and actually probably read this soon, just because my antennae are up. Hal Clement fans are pounding their table saying it's antennae. You got me. Horror times 10. Probably not going to have a ton to say about this. It's an old-timey horror anthology. Be prepared for horror, written by this guy, Alden H. Norton, who is another person I couldn't really find a whole lot of info about. Seems to have put out a tiny amount of original material, I think 2 stories, and is most remembered as an anthologist, wrote with Sam Moskowitz. This has a pretty impressive lineup. The light is not right. I will read it to you. Ray Bradbury with The Trunk Lady, Cool Air from H.P. Lovecraft, August Derleth, Robert Howard, Arthur Conan Doyle, Max Brand, which is sort of unusual. He was a Western writer. I don't think I've ever seen Brand's name in science fiction or horror anthology. W.C. Morrow, who I don't know. Ralph Adams Cram, great name, don't know him. Dorothy Baker, Robert Bloch, and that's it. So some big names in there. And then for this last one, I'll just read you this author's Bibliography, in reverse publication order. Intelligence, from secrets to policy. Vigilance is not enough, a history of U.S. intelligence. The U.S. intelligence community, in annotated bibliography, parentheses, organizations and interest groups. Secrets of the Jeopardy Champions. Evolution and Anatomy, 2nd edition. Leadership and Indecision, Harvard Dissertations in American History and Political Science. And Crispin Magicker. The author is Mark M. Lowenthal. He was a major figure in American intelligence operations during the Iraq War era, and especially the lead up to the Iraq War. I don't know what this is. I don't know where this came from. It was his first ever published book. It's supposed to be really bad too. I mean, some reviewers on Amazon say that it's like required reading. I guess they read it when they were kids, and some people love it. I don't know. A lot of people say that it's just very hackneyed. High fantasy, super derivative. I'll see you back here soon. There was a big gap in the publication of these videos because I've just been working demonically hard trying to clear out all the books that I had on hand stored in the garage, and I'm reaching the end of the pile, although there is a big another load of books coming in that you'll be hearing about and you'll be seeing. If you want even more content, I have a Patreon that costs $5. I have over 200 videos up there. At this point, I think it's well worth $5. A lot of people agree. The link is in the description along with the whatnot info. So I will see you around these parts or those parts, and thanks for watching, making it to the end if you did. See you soon.